Washington, D.C. is not a city I've ever spent a lot of time in, but I've been spending a fair amount of time here in the last couple of months. And I've got to be honest with you, I don't feel completely comfortable. I know many people who've lived here for a while, and they're telling me that the vibe of the city has changed. Now, obviously, that has a lot to do with who is occupying the White House once again, as well as all of the sycophants and enablers who came with him. Plus, of course, we're living in uniquely dangerous times, which is why we all need to start showing up in ways that are different from what we might be used to, ways which might be well outside of our comfort zones. One of the reasons I think we've arrived at this point, this quite treacherous point in our history, is because it's been really difficult for a lot of us to comprehend what we're dealing with. You know, we're 5 years into this fight and we're still fighting it. Partially because in the wake of the big lie in 2020 and the insurrection on January 6th in 2021, not enough people got the message. In the run-up to the 2020 election, I was asked a couple of questions repeatedly. One was, how do we talk to people who are going to vote for Donald, especially those who are voting for him for the second time? My answer then is the same as it would be now. Don't waste your time talking to them. There are so many other people we should be talking to. Many people who perhaps we can convince if we get the message right, which is something Democrats continue to struggle. The other question I was asked a lot was, what happens if Donald gets a second shot at the presidency? To which I said, and I truly wish I'd been wrong, if Donald Trump gets back into office, it will be the end of the American experiment. Of course, it took a while to figure out if that was the case. And okay, we don't know definitively yet, but it isn't looking good. So it could be demoralizing to be in the position we're in. It could be demoralizing to know you're right, that you are on the right side of history, you are on the right side of the issues, and yet it still feels like it doesn't matter. Because 74 million people voted for this. And for decades now, people on the left have been making an assumption about voters on the right that for reasons we can't fathom, they continue to vote against their self-interests. But I think it's more accurate to say that we often mistake what people's self-interests actually are, and that's where the disconnect comes in. Because sometimes the self-interests of other people are, quite frankly, incomprehensible to us. In some cases, we find them unspeakable. We mistakenly believe that their self-interests align with our own. That, for example, they, like us, want their children to do better than they did. They want health care and child care and clean air and water. They want to leave a better planet for their kids. And maybe they do want those things to one degree or another, but they want other things more. They want white people to have more rights than other people. They want to marginalize further those who are already marginalized. They don't necessarily care if they do better than such people. They simply want those people to do worse. That's difficult to wrap your head around. Also, they like it when the people in power, those whom they support, those who represent them and them alone, are cruel to the most vulnerable among us. Those are the self-interests of way too many Americans. And we don't want to face that reality because it's a very difficult thing to face. In 2016, I took the results of that election very personally. But there's a point at which taking things personally is not tenable. So I don't make that mistake anymore. But as an American, I do take serious issue with the fact that Donald Trump and the fascist Republican Party are hell-bent on taking away something that is extraordinarily precious to me and those of us on the right side of this fight. Democracy, our imperfect striving to be more perfect democracy. But we haven't done enough to protect it, which is one of the reasons we're in this mess. Because we never really understood why we needed to make it better or what we needed to do to make it better. We're at a crossroads here and we have some choices to make. The first thing we need to do is ask ourselves where we are, who we are, and what we're facing. Look, I always believe there's hope, but we can't lie to ourselves either. These are treacherous times, certainly the most dangerous times in my lifetime. I believe this was true in 2020, and I think it's infinitely more true now. The choice is between fascism and democracy. And right now, the people in power are the people who want the fascism. We do ourselves no favors if we don't name that clearly. What does that mean? Okay, Democrats are out of power. Yes. That doesn't mean we can't plan. First, though, we need to oppose Republicans at every turn, at every step of the way, and that means showing up consistently and constantly throwing sand in the gears to shout them down, to make our voices heard. We can't afford to continue to squander the few opportunities, the increasingly few opportunities given to us. Yet many Democrats in office fail to understand that, even as the stakes are so painfully obvious. A few weeks ago, Senator Cory Booker spent over 25 hours standing up in the well of the Senate to make the case that democracy is under threat. It was extraordinarily well done, and it was an important demonstration of how to slow the destruction down while simultaneously calling it out. But as soon as I realized that there was not a line of Democrats waiting out the door to take Booker's place, that told me something about how our party leaders misunderstand this moment. Not only do we need to be honest about what's happening with the fascist Republicans, we need to be honest about the ways in which the Democrats are falling short. I'm not talking about performing an autopsy of the 2024 election. Perhaps someday we'll have that luxury, I suppose, but now is not the time for that. We need to figure out how we can be better, how we can be stronger, so that when we are in a position to do so, we can move from opposing the fascists to stopping them. Because if we can stop them, then and only then can we build. And notice, I did not say rebuild, because we need to start from scratch. And that's another thing we can no longer just delude ourselves about. Our institutions are failing us. One of the reasons that that's the case is because the Democratic Party has convinced itself for far too long that they do not need to strengthen our institutions and they don't need to protect them. We failed to recognize what was coming. And we failed to create a counterbalance to the rights onslaughts that have been coming at us for over 4 decades from every direction, because of their vast media infrastructure, their phalanx of think tanks, their infiltration of higher education. It's kind of mind-boggling that we've just watched all of this happen and done nothing. I see this when Democrats continue to choose collegiality over fighting for the American people, when they ignore that their colleagues in the Senate in particular are trying to take so much away from us, including our very ideas about who we are as a people. And who is that exactly? Some of us are so disconnected, so disenchanted, so disinterested that we don't even vote at all, even with everything at stake. The non-voter in this country is the largest voting bloc. 80 million people just couldn't be bothered to show up in 2024, either because they didn't care, they didn't understand, or they felt ignored. Then there are the 74 million people who voted for Donald in 2024, many of them for the second or third time. Now look, I'm skeptical that none of them knew what they were voting for, and I suspect a significant number of them got exactly what they wanted when Donald got back into the Oval Office. But that doesn't mean that there's nobody in that group who can be reached. Of course not. Here's the thing though, I don't like appealing to people's self-interests. It makes me uncomfortable, and I just don't think that that's the way it should be, right? We should always be looking out for each other. But we have to work with what we have, and there are plenty of people who voted for Donald in 2024 who are in the finding out phase of having fucked around. They're beginning to understand that if you cast a vote for somebody for one reason or a small group of reasons, and in exchange you're willing to overlook the racism, the misogyny, the anti-immigrant hatred, the Islamophobia, the explicit promises that that person, in this case Donald, is going to destroy the most valuable things about this country, may not work out well for you. On a more practical level, if you're willing to overlook the track record of failure, the destruction, the lies, simply because inflation was higher than normal and eggs were slightly more expensive at the end of Biden's term, you may begin to realize that there are more important things. And being a supporter of Donald Trump will not make you immune to the devastation he's spreading. If we must, let's appeal to the self-interest of those people because it's effective. And we should have a very easy case to make here. It's an easy case because the economy matters more than anything else to most voters. And there are massive amounts of indisputable data right now showing that Donald and his policies have been utterly disastrous for the economy, both here and globally. But the Republicans are giving us another advantage as well, another case that they're making on our behalf. It probably shouldn't surprise us, but it kind of does surprise me a little bit. But it turns out that a lot of Americans, even Republicans, really do care about the rule of law and due process. When they're worried that that the right to due process is restricted to one class of people, they understand that even if they don't care that an undocumented worker, for example, is illegally detained, disappeared, and incarcerated in a foreign gulag, they do care that denying due process to one person, even somebody who's not an American citizen, means that they themselves may no longer have due process. We need to make that case too. Then what about us? The people who did show up. Those of us who continue to show up and continue to make it as clear as possible that everything is at stake. We all have power. We're all on the right side of history. We're angry. We have every right to be. But here's the thing, our anger is righteous. And if we focus that anger, if we come together and understand that any differences we have are irrelevant compared to what we're fighting for, we can unite effectively to win this fight. So it's harrowing, yes. We need to do things that for many of us will take the kind of courage and bravery we never imagined we'd need to summon. But I absolutely believe that this is a fight we can win, that this is a fight we will win because we together have the courage that's required. So let's recognize who the enemy is. Let's call it what it is. Let's understand that the only way forward, the only way through, is to be brave in ways we never thought we would have to be. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.